So what if I told you that one of the most fundamental laws of physics was actually discovered completely out of order? It's the hidden rule that explains why a simple tool we use all the time, the thermometer, even works in the first place. Let's dive into the story of the law that came before the first.
Seriously, have you ever stopped to think about that? You stick a thermometer under your tongue, wait a minute, and poof, it just knows your exact temperature. How? Is it magic? Is it just making a really good guess? Well, the real answer is one of the coolest and most elegant ideas in all of science.
All right, so to figure this out, we've got to zoom out a little bit and talk about the science of temperature itself. And that means we need to step into the powerful and kind of awesome world of thermodynamics.
You know, the name itself is a huge giveaway. Thermodynamics literally means heat power. It's the branch of physics that explains pretty much everything around us. Why your coffee gets cold, how a car engine actually runs, why ice cubes melt in your drink. It's all about how energy, especially heat, moves from one place to another.
But this is where our story gets, well, a little weird. For decades, this entire super important field of science was actually built on a surprisingly shaky idea.
This is kind of wild when you think about it. You had scientists with these big, important first, second, and third laws that explain how all the energy in the universe behaves. But the whole thing depended on the concept of temperature, and nobody had actually nailed down a solid scientific definition for what that was. It was a huge blind spot, right in the middle of everything.
And this analogy just hits it perfectly. Imagine building this giant, beautiful house, the house of thermodynamics, but you never bothered to check if the foundation was solid. For a while, it might seem fine, but eventually, things are going to start to wobble. They really needed to fix this, and fast.
So how in the world do you fix a wobbly foundation that's already got a house built on top of it? Well, that brings us to the hero of our story, a law that showed up super late to the party, but turned out to be the most important guest there.
Just look at this timeline. It's pretty bananas. The first and second laws, they were set in stone way back in the 1850s. The third law came along in the early 1900s, and then, decades later in the 1930s, this British physicist named Ralph H. Fowler basically puts his hand up and goes, hey guys, I think we might have missed a step.
See, Fowler realized the principle he'd figured out was so basic, so incredibly essential, that it really needed to come before the first law. But you can't just go around renumbering the fundamental laws of physics, right? That'd be chaos. So he came up with this perfectly clever, slightly nerdy solution. He called it the Zeroth Law.
Okay, so what in the world does this super important foundational law actually say? Well, it boils down to a really simple, almost obvious idea about how things find their balance.
The logic here is just plain common sense. Let's make it super simple. Let's say you know that Joe is the exact same height as Louie, and you also know that Mo is the exact same height as Louie. Well, then you don't even need to see Joe and Mo stand next to each other, do you? You already know they have to be the same height. The Zeroth Law takes that exact same logic and just applies it to heat. If object A is the same temperature as object C, and object B is also the same temperature as object C, then A and B have to be the same temperature as each other. And in our little story, object C, our middleman, our Louie, is the thermometer.
Now, the fancy science term for this state of balance is thermal equilibrium. I know it sounds a little complicated, but it's not. It's just the point where two things in contact have stopped swapping heat. The flow is over, everything is settled down, and they've reached the exact same temperature. You see this literally every day. Picture putting a cold metal spoon into a steaming bowl of hot soup. What happens? Heat rushes out of the soup and into the spoon, right? But after a minute or so, the flow stops. The spoon is warmed up, the soup has cooled down just a tiny bit, and they've reached an agreement. They are in thermal equilibrium.
And right here, this is where it all clicks into place. This law, which seems almost too obvious to even say out loud, is the missing piece of the puzzle. It's the reason we know a thermometer isn't just taking a wild stab in the dark about your temperature.
So let's connect all the dots one last time. You put a thermometer under your tongue. The thermometer is our middleman. Heat flows from your body into the cooler thermometer until, you guessed it, they reach thermal equilibrium. And at that exact moment, we know for a fact that the temperature of the thermometer is now the exact same temperature as your body.
And that is the big aha moment. The Zeroth Law is the scientific guarantee. It's the proof in the pudding. It confirms that the number you see on that little screen is a real, reliable measurement of your body's temperature.
Without this law, every temperature reading we've ever taken would just be, well, an assumption.
And hey, how about a little trivia? The guy who invented the first really reliable thermometers was Daniel Gabriel Fahrenheit, way back in the 1700s. And here's a fun fact. While pretty much the whole world uses Celsius, the United States is one of the very few places that still sticks with the Fahrenheit scale for daily life.
And this is why this whole thing is so much bigger than just a thermometer. This simple, obvious rule is a cornerstone of modern science. It's what lets your refrigerator keep your food cold at a precise temperature. It's how astronomers can measure the temperature of stars that are millions of miles away. The light from that star reaches us and it tells our telescopes the star's temperature. It's all the same principle. All of it rests on this one simple idea.
And that leaves us with a pretty cool question to chew on. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other simple, totally obvious things that we do and see every single day are only possible because of some hidden fundamental rule of the universe that we just never even think about.